He was walking away, but his ears were forward, not pinned back, not angry, not sad. I think I called his name, but maybe I only meant to, and now I can't tell the difference between the sound and the silence. The last time I saw Bramble, he didn't look back, and that's the part that keeps me awake, not how he left, but how he never once checked to see if I was still there. I was standing at the gate with my fingers wrapped around the metal, and he just kept walking toward the tree line at the far end of the field. His ears were forward, which was the thing that got me. They weren't pinned back. He wasn't angry or sad. He was just walking into the trees like he knew exactly where he was going, and I wasn't part of that picture anymore. I keep trying to remember if I called his name. I think I did. But maybe I only thought about calling it. There's a difference, isn't there? Between what you actually do and what you only mean to do. The ceiling in this room has a crack that runs from the light fixture to the window. I've counted it 47 times since midnight. The streetlight outside makes everything look electric cobalt, like the whole world is underwater. I'm supposed to be asleep because tomorrow is the first day of school at the new place. But my brain keeps dragging me back to that field and that gate and the shape of a donkey walking away from me. He wasn't supposed to be mine in the first place. That's the part nobody ever really understood. He showed up at the veterinary clinic where my mom works sometimes, doing the cleaning. Someone had found him on the verge of the A34 near Cheadle, just standing there in the rain with a rope around his neck that had been chewed through. The other end was frayed, like he'd pulled until it gave. He was skin and bone when they brought him in, and his eyes had that look that told you he'd already decided what he thought of people. The vet, Dr. Fellows, said he was about 4 years old, which is still young for a donkey. Said he'd probably been used for breeding and then dumped when he stopped being useful. He had a scar on his left hind leg, a clean one like from a wire, and his coat was patchy and dull. They put him in the stable at the back and tried to get near him. He spent the first 3 days pressed into the far corner with his head low, watching them with one eye. Everyone said he was dangerous. Dr. Fellows said he'd kicked a wall so hard there was a dent in the wood. One of the assistants said he bit her when she tried to put a halter on him. They had a meeting about what to do with him and all the options ended the same way. I was 11. I wasn't supposed to be in the stable area at all. My mom had told me to wait in the office and do my homework. But the office had that smell of antiseptic and old coffee that made my stomach turn, and I could hear him from where I was sitting. Not making noise. Here's the thing, just breathing. It was a heavy, careful sound, like he was counting each breath to make sure he was still alive. I walked down the corridor with my homework still in my hand, and I stopped at the door to his stable. There was a window in the top half, and I had to stand on my toes to see in. He was in the corner like they said, but he wasn't pressed against the wall. He was standing with his head up, watching the door. Watching me. Here's the part I've never told anyone the right way. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and neither of us moved. And I knew in the same way you know when you're about to be sick or when someone's lying to you, I knew that he wasn't dangerous. He was just tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I sat down on the floor outside his stable and did my homework there. Multiplication tables. I remember because I kept getting the same one wrong. 7 times 8. I wrote 56, crossed it out, wrote 54, crossed it out. I could hear him shifting inside, the sound of his hooves on the straw. I did that every day for a week. Sat outside his stable and did my homework while my mum finished cleaning. I'd talk to him sometimes, not because I thought he understood, but because the sound of my own voice made the silence less heavy. I told him about school. About how the other kids had stopped asking me to play because I never knew what to say back. About how my dad had left 2 years before and how my mum still set the table for 3 people sometimes before she caught herself. I don't know what day it was when he came to the door. But I looked up from my maths book and there he was, his head over the half door, his nostrils flaring soft and warm. He let me put my hand on his nose. His skin was rough and warm and he stood perfectly still, like he was waiting to see what I would do with the permission he'd just given me. That was the day I stopped being someone who couldn't speak. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mum, not Dr. Fellows, not the assistants who still said he was a lost cause. I kept it like a secret I was afraid to break. Every day after school I'd walk the 2 miles from the bus stop to the clinic, and I'd sit with him until my mum finished work. I started bringing him apples from the tree in the garden of the house we were renting. He'd take them from my palms so gently, his lips curling around the fruit like he was afraid of hurting me. I named him Bramble because of the way his coat looked in the sunset. That electric cobalt sky we get sometimes in autumn, with the light going neon orange at the edges, and his gray-brown coat catching all of it. He looked like a bush that had grown out of the field, like he belonged there more than anything else. Analysis comment 1 to 30% of the way through. The real mistake here is that everyone thought the problem was the donkey. But the donkey was never the problem. The problem was that nobody had ever let him decide to trust someone on his own terms. Same with the girl. She wasn't slow or strange or whatever the school had labeled her. She just needed someone who wouldn't demand words before they were ready. That's the thing about silence, it's not empty. It's waiting for something worth breaking it for. And what's interesting is how both of them knew this instantly, without a single word, while every adult around them kept looking for a solution that could be written down. Back to story. The clinic found him a home eventually. A farmer out near Buxton who needed a guard donkey for his sheep. Dr. Fellows said it was a good placement, that the man knew donkeys, that Bramble would have a job and a field and company. And I thought, okay. That's fine. That's good. He'll be safe. But then my mum lost her job at the clinic because they cut the cleaning budget, and we couldn't afford the rent on the house anymore. She found a flat in Manchester, near Ardwick, above a shop that sold second-hand furniture. 2 bedrooms, if you counted the box room. No garden. No field. No space for anything that needed to breathe. But what I didn't tell anyone, not even Mum, was that 2 days before we left, I walked to the field near the clinic one last time, and Bramble was standing at the fence, waiting for me. I didn't cry when she told me. I just nodded and went to my room and sat on the bed and looked at my hands. I was 12 by then. Old enough to know that crying doesn't change anything. Old enough to know that some things are too big to fight. But I did fight this one. I asked if we could stay. She said we couldn't afford it. I asked if I could stay with someone else. She said there was no one. I asked if Bramble could come to the flat. She laughed, but it wasn't because it was funny. It was because the alternative was worse. I saved every penny I could find for 5 months. Coins from the sofa cushions. Change from the milk money. A 10-pound note I found in a coat pocket that had been hanging in the wardrobe since winter. I put it all in a neon orange tin that used to hold biscuits, and I counted it every night. 14 pounds and 63 pence. I knew that wasn't enough to buy a field or pay for his keep or do anything that mattered. But I didn't know what else to do with the hope. The night before we left, I walked to the clinic one last time. It was already closed, but the stable door had a latch that didn't catch properly, and I knew how to jiggle it open. The moon was bright enough to see by, and the air smelled like damp hay and the cold that comes before frost. He was lying down when I got there, which he hardly ever did. He got up when he heard me, slow and careful, like his joints hurt. Have you ever had to watch someone, or something, you loved get up slowly, in pain, just because you showed up? I sat down in the straw next to him and he stood over me, his big head dropping down until his forehead rested against my shoulder. I stayed there for hours. I told him everything I couldn't say to my mom or the kids at school or anyone. I told him I was scared of the new school. I told him I didn't know how to make friends. I told him I thought maybe I was broken in some way that other people weren't, and that's why words got stuck in my throat. And then I told him the one thing I hadn't said out loud to anyone. I told him I thought my mum was scared too. That she was trying to be brave for both of us and it was making her tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. And I told him I was sorry. I said it over and over until the word didn't sound like a word anymore. Because I was sorry. I was sorry I couldn't keep him. I was sorry I had to choose between him and my mum. I was sorry that being 12 meant you could love something with your whole chest and still not be able to save it. Here's the beautiful part. He didn't move. He just stood there with his forehead against my shoulder, breathing slow and warm, and let me say all of it. And when I was done, he made a sound. Not a bray, exactly. More like a sigh, deep and long, like he'd been holding it in for years. I don't know how long I stayed. At some point the sky started to go neon orange at the edges, and I knew I had to go. I put my arms around his neck and held him, and he let me. That was the first time he'd let me hug him properly. He'd never let anyone do that before. The next day, the farmer from Buxton came with a trailer. I watched him load Bramble from the window of the clinic office, because my mum said it would be better if I didn't go out there. I watched from inside, with my hands pressed flat against the glass, and I saw Bramble walk up the ramp without looking back. He didn't look back at the clinic. He didn't look back at the field. He then didn't look back at me. And I thought, he knows. He knows I can't come. And he's not going to make it harder by pretending I could. I keep turning that over in my head at 3 in the morning, like a stone I'm trying to polish with my thoughts. Did he not look back because he was angry? Because he'd already let go? Because he was braver than me? Or did he not look back because he trusted me? Because he knew I was doing the only thing I could do, and he wasn't going to make me carry his goodbye too? The farmer from Buxton wrote us a letter, I don't know, 3 weeks after we moved into the flat. He said Bramble had settled in well. Said he was guarding the sheep like he'd been doing it his whole life. Said the other donkeys had accepted him. Said he seemed content. Content. That word is supposed to be enough. It's supposed to be the happy ending. But I'm lying here in a room that's too small, in a city that doesn't smell like hay or horses or fields, and I can't stop thinking about whether content is the same as okay. Whether it's the same as happy. Whether a donkey can miss someone the way I miss him. Analysis comment 2 to 60% of the way through. Here's where everything changes, and most people wouldn't catch it because nothing dramatic happens. Actually, the donkey doesn't rear up or bite or make a scene. He just walks up the ramp without looking back. And the girl is watching from a window instead of being there. That distance, the glass between them, is the whole story. She's already starting to lose him before he's even gone. But so gets me, she's the one who chose that distance. Her mum said it would be better, and she agreed. Because some goodbyes are too big to say up close. I wonder how many of us have done that. Watched from a window because being there in person would have broken something we couldn't fix. Back to story. Have you ever had to leave something behind that understood you better than any person ever did? I mean really understood you. Not the version of you that says the right things at the right time. Not the version that laughs when you're supposed to laugh. The version that sits in the straw at 3 in the morning and says the thing you've been too scared to admit. The version that doesn't need to explain itself because the other creature already knows. I think that's what I lost. Not just a donkey. Not just a pet. I lost the only living thing that had ever looked at me and not wanted me to be different. My mum didn't understand. She tried. She bought me a book about donkeys from the charity shop, and she put it on my bed like it would fix something. I left it on the windowsill for a week before I opened it. The pictures made my chest hurt, and I didn't know how to tell her that without making her feel like she'd failed. She hadn't failed. She was just fighting a different battle. The week before we moved, I went to the field where Bramble had been staying at the clinic. They'd moved him to the paddock by then because he was calm enough to be outside. I sat on the fence and he came over and stood next to me, close enough that I could feel the heat coming off his body. The air was cold enough to see our breath, and we stood there making clouds together, not saying anything. I reached out to touch his nose, and for 1 second, I believed that was enough to make him stay, and that's the part one still haven't told you. I had the biscuit tin with me. All £14 and 63 pence. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Give it to the farmer for his keep? Give it to the clinic for the time he'd been there? It was such a small amount. So laughably small. But it was all I had. I left it on the fence post when I walked away. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to leave something behind. A mark. A proof that I'd been there. That I'd tried. My mum sold the biscuit tin at a car boot sale 3 months later. Was the mother right to sell the biscuit tin, effectively erasing the narrator's proof that they tried? She didn't know what it meant. Why would she? It was just a neon orange tin with some change in it. She got 50 pence for it. I didn't tell her. I just nodded when she showed me the 50 pence and said it was good, we needed the money. And that was the moment I learned that some grief doesn't get to be spoken. It just sits inside you, getting smaller and heavier at the same time, like a stone that sinks but never dissolves. The farmer from Buxton sends a card every Christmas. Handwritten, in capital letters because his handwriting is hard to read otherwise. He says the donkey is doing well. Says he chased a fox off last spring, saved 3 lambs. Says the children from the village come to see him sometimes and he lets them pet his nose if they're quiet. I keep the cards in a shoe box under my bed. I don't read them more than once, but I can't throw them away. Because as long as those cards exist, he exists. As long as I've proof that he's still alive, I haven't completely lost him. But here's what I think about at 3 in the morning, when the crack in the ceiling looks like a river. The streetlight turns everything electric cobalt and the city is so quiet I can hear my own heartbeat. I think about whether he remembers me. Whether, when he stands in the field at sunset and the light goes neon orange over the hills, he thinks about the girl who sat outside his stable doing multiplication tables. Whether he remembers the apples. Whether he remembers the night I fell asleep with my head against his side and woke up covered in straw with his nose resting on my hair. Or whether animals are better at letting go than we are. Whether he walked up that ramp and never looked back because he'd already said goodbye. Because he knew that's what love was. Letting the other person go without making them carry your weight. I'm almost 13 now. Almost a teenager. Almost old enough to understand that the world doesn't give you what you deserve, it gives you what you can negotiate. And I couldn't negotiate for him. I was 11 and then 12 and then almost 13, and I had £14 and 63 pence and a neon orange biscuit tin, and none of that was enough to keep a donkey. But I think about something else too. The way he looked at me that first time, through the window of the stable door. The way he came to the half door and let me touch his nose. The way he stood with his forehead against my shoulder and breathed. There are some bonds that don't need words to be understood. There are some bonds that don't need witnesses. And I think maybe that's enough. Maybe the fact that it happened at all is worth more than the fact that it ended. I still can't sleep. The streetlight flickers once, twice, then holds steady. Somewhere in Manchester, a car door slams and an engine starts. The city is waking up. Another day is coming whether I'm ready for it or not. I turn over and press my face into the pillow and I let myself remember one more thing. The sound he made that night. The sigh. Like he was saying, I know. I know you tried. I know you couldn't. I know you loved me. It's okay. I don't know if that's what he meant. I don't know if animals can mean things like that. But I choose to believe it. Because that's what you do when the truth costs more than the lie that replaced it. You choose the lie that lets you get out of bed in the morning. The crack in the ceiling has a shape that looks like a tree. I've never noticed that before. A tree with branches going in all directions. Maybe that's what I'll think about instead. Not the gate. Not the tree lean. Not the way he didn't look back. Maybe I'll think about the tree on the ceiling, and the way the light keeps changing. And how tomorrow is another day in a city that has never smelled a donkey's breath in the cold air. And maybe that's not a happy ending. But it's real. And it's mine. That field near Buxton. I've never been there. But I know the exact color of the grass in October. That was one of the things we had. The way the light hit the fields in autumn, turning everything neon orange at the edges, making the shadows long and blue. I remember the first time I saw Bramble in that light. He was standing in the paddock and the sun was going down behind him and he looked like something from a story. Not a real donkey. A creature that had stepped out of a painting. I think about him in that field in Buxton, standing in the same light, with the hills behind him and the sheep spread out like stones. I think about whether he looks up when he hears a car. Whether he ever walks to the gate and stands there, waiting for something he can't name. I'll never know. That's the part that keeps me awake. Not the goodbye. The not knowing. The way the story doesn't have an ending I can live inside. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the stories that matter don't end. They just keep going, somewhere else, in a language you don't speak, in a field you've never seen. And you learn to live with that. You learn to get up when the light comes back, even when it's city light through a window that faces another wall. You learn to carry the orange tin and the 14 pounds and the sigh he made that night, all of it, in a pocket inside your chest. You learn that some bonds don't end. They just change shape. I think I can sleep now. Just a little. Just enough. That moment when Bramble didn't look back, would you have called his name again or just watched? If this story made you ache with that quiet, open-ended love, that's what the like button holds. If you're still holding a goodbye that never really finished, this channel is your field to stand in.